me at Jello, Jello. You had me at Jello.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's 5 o'clock on a Friday again. Time for another episode of Cello Chat. And with me today is Paul Kosower. Paul, how are you doing?
I'm doing just great. Thank you. It's really great to be on your show.
All right. Well, I'm very much looking forward to this. So traditionally, we start with background, your kind of narrative bio. How did you get into music in the first place and into both cello and organ?
Well, my father was a pastor, so that takes care of the organ part. I heard every Sunday. And but he had us take lessons. They both did, my father and mother, with their church organist, but we learned piano first, of course. And I was 5 at the time, and then things progressed later on. As I attended school, I wanted to play the trombone, and I went to school and I didn't have one, so I came home with a cello.
Same clefs.
Yeah, right. That was a serious God. And my sister wanted the violin because she wanted the smaller of the two instruments. So that's how that came about. And interesting enough, I took from a very fine student at Worcester College, and presently my daughter-in-law teaches there. So, things have a funny way of working out.
That's so true.
But that's where I started. That's where it all started. And being in a pastor's family, we moved around, and I didn't. Then when we moved to where I first started cello, it was a little town called Loudonville, Ohio, 80 miles south about of Cleveland. And we moved to another town called Lisbon, Ohio. And again, the church organist happened to have a cello and gave it to me to use. And that was really kind of her. And it was a good cello, so I used that for a while. And I took lessons from Jacob Hubert in Youngstown, Ohio. And during high school, I played in the symphony, which was fun to do. And it was pretty good orchestra at that time. I don't know what it is now, but I know at that time it was strong. And so that was a great experience. And I'm just trying to abbreviate everything. Then I went to Kent State and took from a doctor. His name was White at the time. And I felt he was a good teacher too. And finally, through chance, I went to the Cleveland Institute of Music because my father moved to Cleveland, and he liked the Cleveland Institute from way, way back. And so then I studied with Ernst Silberstein, and at that time, he was co-principal. I was supposed to study with Jules Erskine, I guess, or Eskin. He moved to Boston right then as I arrived. So then I took from my teacher, and I was there 5 years, and things went on, and I could not accept an orchestral job, which was disappointing because of the war. The draft, and I was one of the lucky. I was lucky I didn't have to go, but I wasn't lucky that I was a 1A, and that's not the classification you want during a war. But I luckily there was Title III grants under the Kennedy administration, and I took a string quartet job in Terre Haute for only a year, and but that was quite an experience, and in many ways enjoyable, and some not so enjoyable. But we won't go into that. It's very difficult to throw 4 people together and form a quartet, as you know. So then we went. After that, I went to East Carolina for a couple of years, and I really liked it. It was a strong program, and it's even stronger today. The School of Music there, because they had several people, chair of the music department who recruited a lot of fine players right directly out of Juilliard and out of great schools. And the gentleman that did it, I still worked with when I was there that many years ago. And he was here visiting me, and he says, at my age, he says, I didn't have to care about it. I just did it. I wanted what was best for the school. And that's the kind of leadership I think they needed at that time, you know. So, and then I moved to Eau Claire, and I've been here ever since. I'm retired. I think you know that. And but through my career here at Eau Claire, I've taught cello at least 37 and a half years, and organ similarly. And I'm still teaching organ because they have a new cello professor here, but they never hired another organ professor, and I didn't want to see that beautiful instrument go to waste. And I double majored at the Cleveland Institute, so I taught. So I've been keeping both instruments up, and I practice them a lot, you know, and set up concerts. But when fishing season comes, I think it's good to get away too from music and be free from what should I say, pauper, piety, you know, that sort of thing. But you know, I've helped make my own opportunities, and I have soloed quite frequently with symphony orchestra and played many of the concertos, and I still do. And recently did the Dvorak, and that's quite an experience, isn't it? When you sit, you've done it. You sit on your cello platform, and you hear all those themes going, and the tremendous crescendo of the orchestra. It's about launches you, you know. But it also, when they're doing all that, it's not good to think ahead of the most difficult passages. You know what I mean?
Yes,
Or you won't even, you know, you don't even enjoy the opening if you do that. So there's a lot you learn by performance, and it adds to the excitement, and it adds greatly to the student if they have those kind of goals. If they don't have performance goals, as you know, what's the purpose? You know, you want to play for others besides just your teacher. You want to play for other teachers. You want to play for other students, and that sort of thing. I have a lot I can say about that, but I mean, that's basically my career, and you know how easy it is to turn into hundreds, and then finally you're over the number of 1,000 concerts. You know how that goes, and through the years. But it's not how many you do. It's what you learn by doing them and how you feel when you perform. And if you don't, you know, my big thing, and some people say, well, maybe this is old school, but if you don't feel something within when you perform, if you're executing notes like so many are brought up with the computer, and the computer is a wonderful vehicle, and it's wonderful in as much as you can listen to other performers very quickly. But if you play like the computer, I'm just not for that. You know what I mean? I still think there's more to say in a phrase than just executing the notes. And this is a trend nowadays. I listen on the radio to lots of new performers coming up, and even on keyboard, on any instrument, a person should listen, and you say to yourself, does that person say something? Is he communicating to his audience, or is this a razzle dazzle, you know? And it's wonderful if you can play razzle dazzle and play fast. That's wonderful. You can do that, but are you really interpreting the music, or you're just playing fast? I don't know. That I toy with that all the time. I talk to my son. He says, Dad, times have changed. but he still likes to say something, and he certainly does through every note, you know, he plays. And so it's an interesting fact. How do you feel about that?
Oh, I think you're spot on. And this, I mean, it's in a way kind of like acting. We don't want to hear the one perfect delivery of that line, and now we're kind of done, and we don't want to hear it delivered any other way. it has to be real. It has to be in the moment.
Yes, and it should be spontaneous too, I think. You feed off of those who are there. I don't care if it's 10, 20, 1,000, you feed off the audience. And so a lot of things will be spontaneous in that moment. Sometimes when I was performing with Jeannie Yu, do you know her?
Yes.
Yeah, Stefan's wonderful wife, and Stefan's a fine cellist at UW Milwaukee.
Mm-hmm.
But I was performing with her, and we had a real nice audience, and we were performing, and I thought, well, I was playing maybe something like the slow movement of the Chopin, and I thought, I'm going to see if she can get beneath this, and every time she did. That's a true pianist that can do that. I mean, how soft we can play in the cello. And it was just so enjoyable to be able to do that spontaneously, even though we had worked out many of those things. But in real performance, we went way beyond, is the point. And creativity is wonderful, and it's not the easiest thing to teach right away.
It is not. Yeah, or how to play in that genuine manner in the moment.
Right.
Nerves and self-consciousness, all of these things you mentioned earlier, the students have to learn from performing how to get over these things.
That's true. And do you find as you, I don't lose the zest for playing at all, but do you find as we become a bit older, I find that I feel less nerves. Maybe my nerve endings are shot. Nice. Maybe they're gone. But no, I suppose that's only natural. You can feel more confident. You would think maybe the opposite, but with me, I feel more confident. But I make sure I'm prepared too. But it doesn't mean it's going to be perfect. You never know that. But is perfect the goal? No. You want it to be as clean as possible, but the goal is to reach the audience through interpretation, is what I feel. And if you don't have an interpretation, well, maybe some people think interpretation is like you play Bach very steady, and that's true. We should play Bach steady, but Bach still wrote cadences, and he still wrote, he wrote, I believe he believed in some freedom in the line, or how could he have written all those cantatas and all those vocal lines, and people that they have the right to the expression to play Bach steady and straight and nothing in the cadence except at the end. Well, that's fine, but it doesn't communicate to me. I think you get a lot more power preparing the cadences and the feel. It still has to have consistent tempos. I'm not talking real gushy, but I'm talking about appropriate preparation of a new entrance. Like when I play a fugue on the organ, I prepare the new theme coming in just ever so slightly, and it makes more sense and it adds stability to the piece. So it makes more sense to me. Not everybody.
There's a very nice recording on YouTube of you playing the Liszt fugue on BACH.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm glad.
And you mentioned the instrument at Eau Claire. I've heard it's a really wonderful. Is it one of a kind instrument or just?
Well, it was one of the last of a kind, Aeolian Skinner. And that was a very famous country, and you can go through the country and even in some of the great cathedrals, they have Aeolian Skinners. They did more and more. They don't have as many, but they're still there and rebuilt. It's a beautiful romantic, actually, type of instrument. And we were on the tail end of it, so I tell you, I can't be sure that it's all Skinner, the pipe work. And they were beginning to thin out and try to make in the 70s, they were trying to, in the 60s also, a Baroque sounding instrument. And I think they forgot the orchestral aspects, some of that, which now they're going back to, it's back and forth. But still, the instrument we have has still a very good foundation. I mean, the pipework's quite large, and that's good for the hall. I think it's a beautiful organ. We're lucky we have it. It's just put on the shelf in the Gantner concert hall. And I've tried to keep it going so it won't be dumped. You just never know. Why the faculty at the time decided maybe it was cuts were necessary, so they cut an organ position. Well, my position was cello anyways, but I volunteered to keep it going. And by volunteer, I mean that's what it was.
Mm.
I took it on, and and I've basically kept it going. And one of my colleagues, Donald Patterson, for a number of years kept it going when I first retired, and then he retired, and then I thought, well, I don't want to see this program die. So, and to this day, I'm recruiting, and I have I don't have many right now. I have four and a couple waiting, 4 students, but they all are training to be church musicians, and some have good jobs already. Excellent. And it's fun to work with them. They just are fun, and I really enjoy. And I guess I do create enthusiasm teaching organ also because I love it so, and I love the cello, of course. And but I had to one or the other now, and since they don't need cello right now, that's why I'm teaching organ. But I use the same sort of approach and techniques that I use with cello, and it's wonderful. The thing is, technique is so important. But I find I listen sometimes once in a while to a jury or something on strings, and what I find when people play technique, and this happened with my own students too, and I tried to change it, is they play it like technique. They play it like an exercise. And it should still have, I'm sure Popper meant it to be played as music. And as music, it requires interpretations, ups and downs and shadings. And he marks some of those things in there, of course, and Piatti too. I mean, some people play Piatti, as you know, for concert. That's pretty brave if you play one of the caprices in a concert, My son's, of course, he does that once in a while, and it's fun to hear. And he does a lot of unusual things, like play all the violin unaccompanied Bach pieces in public.
Yep. Now, I'm curious, how is it that Mark and Paula both ended up as cellists and not organists?
Yeah, that's a good point, because my son, when he was real small, used to sit beside me on the organ bench. He liked it so well. And if I was playing, for example, a concert, and I remember how shocked I was. I missed a drawbar once, and he looks over and he just automatically pulled it.
Nice.
Yeah, it was nice. But how did they? Well, we started him on. Well, Mark started on a Nagoya. You know how small those are. They're equivalent to about a 16th German size Suzuki instrument. And Paula had a Lewis, I guess it was a Lewis cello, tiny, but it was bigger than the Nagoya. And so, not exactly some of these birthday gifts. I was walking by a shop, and there I saw this little cello, and it was near her birthday, so I went and I bought it, and I brought it home, and I don't know, she seemed to be interested in it, so she started playing it, and then I think it's very important, just like athletes, that they associate with others who play the instrument. If they're a loner in a room day after day after day, what does that do? Well, I think it could become dull fast, you know.
Mhm.
So I encouraged my kids to be in the Suzuki program, and they did, enjoy it. Some people were against Suzuki programs because they don't read right away, but my kids did. They had both, and but they did enjoy performing with others. And at that time, they had the big Minneapolis Suzuki program, and he came over himself to conduct it. And they would put numbers on each cellist of the level they could play. There were at that time 3,000 of them there. And was that ever amazing to watch and listen to? All those little kids. And mine were part of it. I don't remember what number they were, but they played when they were supposed to. And, you know, but that went on. And pretty soon we went to church and played. And I, of course, knew the different places, but I had them playing our church at first. And at the age of 3, they were playing, Mark was playing, and Paula was going on, she's probably 6. And they played in church on Christmas Eve, and I accompanied on the organ. Of course, I used very soft strings to accompany, so they would carry with these little instruments, but they did do a credible job. And it went from there. It just went then to string tech class, because I wanted the students to know that they should be able to play Twinkle Little Star Variations soon. And so I brought them in, and that was kind of fun to do. And you know, by the time Mark was, I'm trying to think, he was 5 or 5 or 6, and Paula probably was 9. You know, they were already playing with, they started playing with orchestras. And Mr. Schluter, Ed Schluter, had the Mississippi Valley Symphony in St. Paul. It was called Chamber Orchestra at first. He invited them to play, and they did a bang-up job of the Vivaldi double, and it just went from there, from orchestra to orchestra. And I started, I started just putting more effort to get them to play and make opportunities for them. And I had done so many myself already, and I had connections all over the country. The people, they would just believe my word, and it was true. They came in and they played, and they played for cello congresses. We were invited to play for a lot of big names, Rostropovich and Nelsova and Shapiro. All those wonderful artists were at these events, and Jana Starker, and they were enamored with both of them. Yo-Yo Ma was there, and he had Paula play the Boccherini, and Mark got to open a concert, the big concert with the Haydn C when he was 9 years old. And he had a little bigger cello, but it wasn't huge. It was I can't even think of the name of it now, but it was a nice little instrument. And people to this day are still talking about that performance. I just can't believe it. Every once in a while I run into someone, they said on Facebook, do you know the little guy with the red vest? Because he had a little red vest. But these things added to their enthusiasm and meeting all these people, and they wanted to go on. They wanted to learn in college, and you have to set up the goals ahead of time. I think when they study in elementary school, when they study, all different levels. And my daughter teaches many 5-year-olds, and she loves it because they come up with questions that you wouldn't expect, And she does teach them, and they do end up playing well. Most of them do. Not all, of course, you never know. But in the Chicago area, she's a noted teacher now, and she plays with the symphony, and she's a freelance artist, and the opera orchestra, and all these things. What you do adds to what you can do with your students. And to sit year after year and just talk about it and not demonstrate is I think, a mistake. They need to hear it. And they also need to be encouraged to attend concerts. And they don't all do it without encouragement. And, think when we were kids, a lot of times it's a weekend. Uh, did you want to go to a concert or go out with your friends? And that enters into it. But if you really truly are enthused about the instrument, you'll want to see, wow, if you can get them to that first concert, they'll never quit going if they really like it. And like Minnesota Orchestra, or one of the great orchestras to go and listen to an artist like Yo-Yo Ma, all these things can turn you on to cello. And I think they're part of the development, not just to hear your teacher play. You should hear each other play. I used to hold, I'm sure you've done many times, classes, even Saturday mornings, and I get them over there. And at the highlight, the highlights sometimes, Eau Claire was extremely strong through the 70s and 80s. I don't mean they're not strong now, they are, but it was different because we had so many students. And I remember having, I understand you have 12 fine students, and that's so commendable nowadays. It's incredible because it's very difficult to get that many. And that's to your credit. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
I at a time had 12 students, and I remember this one time so well because each one of them at this class I had could play not only excerpts, they played major concertos. I had them all going, and was that ever exciting? And they moaned and groaned maybe sometimes when they came in Saturday morning, But once they got playing, and I let them comment, and they were very polite to each other, but I let them comment on each other. And I think that was a good way to learn, And some of these people are still playing their cello, and they played well, but you just don't know how it'll influence any more than on Music Caprice. Have you taught that course? And you teach that course, and years later, people come back and they say, you open a new life for me or something, even if it's a handful, that's wonderful, because the competition for classical music it's not only fierce in itself, but it's fierce against pop music. And they're clearing huge areas in Eau Claire to have country jam right now. But the university has done a great job to support music. They've redone the whole fine arts in the offices and the concert hall, and I'm very pleased what they've done, and they're a very nice faculty, so I'm happy with that. Now, we'll get back to teaching. I know you had a lot of things you wanted to cover. You just shoot.
Yeah, well, and I suppose often earlier on by now I would have asked a question about motivating students. It's just one of the running themes of this series, but you've hit on so many great aspects of motivating students in the first place. I mean, just as we've been going, the keeping the eye on the ball of the interpretation, the musicality, and not letting the technique become the tail that kind of wags the dog. And doing it with other people, like the Suzuki method, for example, and setting the goals before the fact. But are there additional things that you would like to elaborate on with respect to helping people keep their own fire alive and get the instrument out and practice it so that they advance and they like it even more, and the process becomes self-fulfilling?
Well, one of the things is I think they're not used to, a lot of them don't hear themselves. I think with all modern technology, and buy a little recorder and a quality one, it's good if they would record themselves and then say, am I doing this, One of the biggest things, as you know, is using enough bow. You can use too much for certain technical passages, but that's usually not the case. I find, and Mark does all the time, he finds students over the country and they end up with, about that much bow. And it's like singing. You have to have that breath. Mm-hmm. And as soon as you move, you don't need to press real hard. How hard do you press down on your left hand and the right hand? That's a difficult question. But you want to relax the tension between each finger. And there is a way to do that. And I learned all my life. Now I learned from my son, who he's out playing all kinds of things. And my daughter, she's a classic example of how you hold a cello and operate the bow. And she just is such a graceful player, and it's beautiful to watch. But this is what we need. We need good motion of the body, not extraneous motion. The greatest, this all adds up to beauty of tone and how enthused I think the students would be playing. But I'm thinking of something else that, other than setting the goals and playing in master classes and that kind of thing, another thing they could do if they really love the cello is they could apply and go to a summer school, and that would add to their enthusiasm. And it serves many purposes. You get together with an orchestra and a group, and you're not just playing music. You go swimming, other things. I think that's all important to music. Nature, And I was going to add pictorial imagery. Do you use that? You know what I mean, don't you?
Yeah.
I know you do. And this is so important. I'll tell you why. You don't want to use this immediately. You can start small. Excuse me. I got this. There's a forest fire in Canada, and we're getting some of the smoke. Mm. This imagery to me is important. For example, once when my mother passed away, I play many concertos, but I just happened to play the Dvorak again. And the audience said they could hear my story and what I was saying. It comes through. It really does, and it can. And in my case, it really did, because I felt it, and of course, everyone would feel. You feel the wound, and it came out, but it came out for the good. See, that's what you want to do, and you don't want it to just be sorrowful. You want it to be happy. Yeah, wow. And let's face it, the first part of the Dvorak, the Allegro, that's happy galloping, more cowboy style, right? You know what I mean by that. Yeah. I think that's what he had in mind, and sometimes we find it's hard to get the orchestra to move when you want to start that. Do you ever feel that?
Yes.
After the trills,
Yeah, not just in that concerto, though. Sometimes it can be hard.
Many concertos to get them to move, and you think, I'm in a straitjacket. But the last one I played with, he was a bass player. He knew exactly what to do, and he was wonderful. Nice. And you do get wonderful conductors and wonderful people, the groups. But anyways, pictorial imagery, as long as the student has it at grasp, they might think of something like have a wonderful joy maybe in their heart, thinking of being with their folks or being on vacation or a sunset, anything like that. You're still thinking of the music, but you think of beautiful scenery maybe, or they could think of someone they love, if it's music. Now, I think that's important, because I think that adds to the story. And a great proponent of the story is, of course, Yo-Yo Ma. And he was always talking about the story. What story do you want to tell? And he had such a point, and he's such a natural artist. everyone likes Yo-Yo, and Yo-Yo likes everybody. I think he's true to his art, and he's true to the people. Such a wonderful man. That alone, listening to him, going to one of his classes, would add tremendous enthusiasm. The way you need to see more than your teacher. Your teacher's the starting point, and hopefully guides you towards your goals. But it's important to have those goals. But if you add all these things together, at first you want to get your technique down, but you want to play it beautifully. And one thing I notice sometimes, the most obvious, people start their lesson, they don't play scales. And I'm a stickler. I think scales are so important. And not just to play da 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 da, not that. You must, I feel, play in rhythms and different bowings, because you're going to do that all the time in the orchestral literature, and the concertos too. Just think of all the scale work of the Haydn D, for example. That's very obvious, And so I think that's all important in the development of being a fine cellist. And another thing I think that gets overlooked too often is having their instruments set up properly. And they're struggling. Like, I remember this one student was good, and I said, let me have the cello. And I thought, oh my word, how's he play on that thing? The strings were so high and stiff. He says, well, I don't know. I says, well, you could do much better if you weren't struggling with the instrument. I think that's so important to insist that they have their instruments set up. It doesn't mean you have to have the best instrument in the world. We all started, with instruments that were in between. Certainly, I started on gut. I guess that tells you where I was. Can you imagine? No, you can, because Isaiah, he played on gut for years, didn't he? And I always said, oh, please change. I was thinking to update the strings, because they carry so much better, But and then what kind of strings? And you want to teach the student about the instrument so they can straighten a bridge if they need to, and so they understand how it works. And I think that's often neglected. I don't remember my teachers talking about that. I think I did it because of my kids, and then they ask questions all the time, So, how do you feel about that? I mean, that's important too. It's almost pedagogy, isn't it? Sort of.
It is. We ask them sometimes to think of their instrument as being like an extension of themselves, and
Sure.
if they can think in terms of the physics of the instrument and what aspect of their setup might be limiting them. Yeah, like what you say, it can be talked about in the same sentence as when you want them to move closer to the bridge because they understand the why of it.
That's right. And where Mark has gone over the years, they call him the cello doctor because he has saved people from ruining their arms, even in New York. And in New York, they have a special, they call it the tight setup. And they play sort of like that, really tight. And all that energy, it's good to press down, the C string once while you press firm and a little stiffer for the sound. But if you do that on every string, you're in trouble. And the thing is, they would do that, and then they couldn't move freely or fast enough, and they actually had pains in their arms and fingers. So he tried to help them with that. And I went to one class, and he was doing it at a school of somebody I knew pretty well, but they were, unfortunately, they just weren't bowing freely. Maybe that much. That's there. And he immediately freed them up, and he had them follow through. And I remember when Starker first started teaching, he would show his approach, and And it was amazing what the difference in the sound would be. And I used to think, oh, maybe it'll be reserved because he wasn't known for the big sound. But when you heard him play and heard someone else play, it was a difference of the world and quality and freeness and sound. The man was utterly amazing. He has this dry sense of humor. And I think when you come in, he entertains too, but he gets the points across. And the students love him. I mean, most of them do. And he's very humorous. And I heard that if he smokes a lot, he's upset with the student.
I think he does anyway.
Yeah, he did anyways. Yeah. But he went through a pack real quick. But he was always trying to help them and with such ease. And he says, go down the hall to, his other, whoever else was teaching and play for him. And I think that's wonderful. Yeah. He never worried about anyone else. We're to work together. And the students studying need to know that they're to work together and they're to get ideas from other faculty, a clarinet teacher, anything. Yeah. And I was lucky. I got to work with Marcellus, the great clarinetist from Cleveland, and he had to this day, he had the most beautiful tone I've ever heard on the clarinet. Mm-hmm. He was such a master. And we would naturally, what we played, the Brahms, the clarinet trio and things like that. But, he was just so helpful. And why did he succeed? Well, he had a great personality and he was a fabulous musician, but I think his personality won me over immediately. And and my teacher had a good personality. He was maybe a little stricter. He was from Germany, and he had a hard life in many ways. They had to actually escape, and that's really rough. But such a gentleman, and he loved nature, and he climbed mountains, and that's important. It's important to my son. He's always climbing mountains, and I said, Mark, be sure to take someone along, will you? But you see, all these things you go to Aspen, you climb mountains, okay. You play in wonderful orchestras. You have a span of wonderful teachers. All this is there. And what could be more exciting, And if the students do that and socialize and then come back, they're generally very refreshed and they're enthused because they got to experience music all over. And I think that's important, not to just think, I'm going to Eau Claire. That's okay, that's fine. But what are you going to do this summer? Well, sometimes they have to work. I grant you, and I say that's fine. Come back for a lesson or something, and to keep them moving. I mean, I did the same. I remember when my teacher called me up, and I've been fishing for 3 weeks, mind you, and he wanted me to audition for the Atlanta Symphony. I said, I can't do that. The hooks in the hand, and your figures are shot after fishing 3 weeks. That's funny. You can imagine. But it was good for me, but I wasn't ready for an audition.
That's right.
You do have to be ready, and plan it that way, But I don't know. Let's see. I wrote an article way back for the string teacher in '94. That's way back. Were you born yet? You know what I mean? But anyways, I called it All in the Family. And then I told all these different stories about working with my kids, and funny things happened. I'm not going to tell you everything about the Dolce Trio, but we did play together for 10 years as a family, and it brought us very close together. And pretty soon they started composing for us, and they took us seriously because we did play like a fine string quartet. And we had the nuances of that. We played for major reviewers and big cities, and it was just a joy. And I was so proud of the kids, But anyways, when we went on tour, now we did other things. We played tennis. Our program was ready. We did enough to warm up for the concert. But it's important to have these other aspects besides our music, and it enhances your music. It doesn't mean you can play all the time, but it means don't just do music. Do life. And when I took Mark when he was pretty young to some of these competitions, when he won the Irving Klein many years ago, and I went there with him, and everyone was practicing in the building up to 7 hours a day. That can only work against you. You don't want to do more than a track runner does. If you run, I found out the hard way, you run 11 miles the week of your race, you're done. You've expended all that with the muscles and everything. Well, the same can happen this way. And you get tense after playing that much. Well, I took him to Alcatraz. And we had a picnic out there, and I goofed off a little just to make him laugh. And somebody in their album has me behind bars. I was acting like I was trying to break out. But I did coach him the whole time. We were there when we did rehearse. I coached him and as accompanist. And he was practicing, and he even included his own piece. So he's all enthused. He always was excited when he's going to play, and in a good way. And I listened and I listened and listened, and finally went downstairs, and I said, "You can win this thing if you play your best, and I know you will." And so he went out and he did his best, and he won unanimous of all the judges. And they said, "How do you feel?" And he was 15 at the time. He says, "Happiest day of my life," and he meant it though,
Yeah.
And from there on, then we went around, and I brushed up my piano skills, and we started performing all the greats with cello and piano, and it was just a joy to go from place to place. And sometimes 1,000 people would be there, sometimes not. You never know. But is that important? Not really. You play your best no matter how few or how many. That's what you always want to do.
Yeah.
But all these things add to the enthusiasm. Minneapolis, they have these nice little competitions. That's wonderful to do a little bit of that, And if you win, fine. If you don't, you get the experience of performing.
You're here
at a young age, because a lot of them want to be an orchestra. And they don't always know, what the demands are. So if someone makes a comment like, we play as well as the Chicago Symphony, and then they mean spirit-wise, Well, one student ran off, and she said she's going to audition for the Chicago Symphony and join them this summer. It doesn't work that way. But these are, in other words, you work your way up, like anything, like music or any position. Don't you agree?
Yeah.
And it's a process, but it's a process that you don't have to put it away. It doesn't have to end. And Mark told me, he says, "I don't know anyone who plays a Dvorak at your age." He told me. I says, "Well, as long as my fingers work and I have the will to do it, I'm going to keep playing, and I don't quit music. And if I had to quit, I'd keep playing the organ then, because not that organ's easy, but the cello, that demands more refinement. More by refinement, I mean the room for error is much, it's close, but it becomes automatic too, going up and grabbing them. sometimes we wish they had written it an octave lower. But do you play the franc up, an octave? Do you do that, or do you keep it in a range? Some don't.
Franc is one of those sonatas I haven't played. I don't know. It's kind of funny. The pieces that are not originally for cello that we tend to play in our repertoire, like the Arpeggione Sonata,
right.
That's one of them where I guess that piece never grabbed me enough to really.
It's a tremendous difficulty, but that's not the reason. It just didn't seem to fit the cello. Isn't that true?
Yes.
Because it was written for the violon piccolo or something, cello. And that's a small instrument, extra strings. They never had to shift up.
Right.
No, I agree. I mean, everyone has the pieces they love. And you can't possibly play every piece in the repertoire.
Yeah.
And you pick the ones you like. And the Francoeur Sonata has a virtuoso movement in that, but it's a beautiful piece. And this is another point that helps the student. I don't think it's good anymore to keep them on one piece a whole semester, because even though they probably need it, they need to cover more literature than that. And then when they come back to the piece, it should be improved if it's done in a graduated way, you know what I mean, of difficulty. And I mean, at first, with the freshman year, some you could keep on Vivaldi the whole year, but you don't want to do that. You want to show them other styles, and this is important for them to have. And I think most teachers try to do that, but I'm not sure. I don't know, what they go over. And in other words, we can be too much of a perfectionist with our students, and they'll learn more if we're not, Yeah. And Starker, he would move it along, and it worked, that way.
Right.
So that's a very important factor in their studies too, is that they. I talked to some even my organ students, and they tell me they haven't studied Brahms on the piano. And I said, study Brahms on the piano? That would be a must in my book. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The greats need to be gone over, just like Bach needs to be gone over, because Bach is such a foundation for everything that followed. And still, some of the greatest music ever written, as I know you agree.
Yeah. Well, then the etudes can allow us some additional flexibility in terms of if there's a technique that we want the student to keep drilling and working on over time quite a bit. Anyway, it just adds something where you're not necessarily performing the etudes, but you can use that to help the students in an area where they need some help while the repertoire is being moved through these various pieces.
That's very good. It's very important to do the etudes, and like Lundgren one, that Popper wrote, put that right in, with it. And light spiccato things, survey, the D major, that can be done. My teacher had such a graceful bow arm, and then he had two torts to use, and they cushioned it so nicely. And my bow was unbalanced. And he says, let me see, after you play on a balanced bow, you can play on anything else. I don't notice. I says, well, you could probably use a utility pull and bounce it. I can't. It was top heavy. It was just. Well, he was great.
How long have you had your Gabrielli?
Oh, I've had that since 1970.
Wow.
And it's been through a lot of things. And do you want to know how many bridges I have? No.
Do you even know? Have you lost count?
No, probably 100. But it's not just the bridges. What I learned later in life, it's mostly the sound post. The bridge has to be good, but it's mostly the sound post. Now you have, of those who are studying cello, you have two ways to look at it. Some makers will they'll put the sound post in and say it doesn't move. That's where it belongs. Then you move the bridge around to compensate. Others will put the bridge right where they feel it belongs in the center, and some line up with those little indentures on the F holes. And they'll claim it's a post thing to move. But I have the most marvelous repairman. You know David Folan by chance, the cello maker, and he is so wonderful. He's changed so many things in my Gabriele for the good. And even recently, he made me a new bridge, and he redoes the shaping of the fingerboard, has a proper scoop so it's easy to play. And so much depends on the height of the nut in the back and the saddle up front and the angle of the strings. All this is a learning process that takes, it takes more than a year. It takes years. You get exposed to it. And are you like me, very fussy about your instrument and the adjustments and all?
Yes. Yeah.
I figured you were.
The weather up here almost kind of makes it, I don't know, it just changes so much from summer to winter. When I was in Texas, it was not that big of a deal, really, because it's doesn't change that much.
Where were you down there?
Oh, I was at UT in most of the 90s, studying with Phyllis Young.
Oh yeah.
But coming up here, it seems that it just is, it's an evolving target over the course of each year.
Yeah, I was tempted to go to Texas once at Baylor.
All right.
But, I didn't go because I didn't want to uproot my kids from school. It isn't worth it. And it had been fun, though, to try it, But it's okay. I'm not suffering any. Here's what I believe in. I believe you don't have to teach at a conservatory. You don't have to teach in the most famous Ivy League school in the country or that. You need to teach well, and you will be who you are wherever you live. Wow. So there are schools and all over the country that have, I'm sure, very fine cello teachers, and the students should realize that. Sure, you can get name people, but some of the name people are 100 years old, and that doesn't mean they aren't good, but it can mean that it's not quite as exciting. Sometimes I have to have a nap. But the thing I want to emphasize, if they want to study in school, you have to you ask your teacher. And like I have a student now that wants to go to Juilliard. Well, that's okay, but is that the all in all? Well, my son did. He tried to loosen them up. So I don't know. There's different teachers all the time, so you never know. But one thing for sure, it's expensive. When he went to New York, the expense was so great that just a 400 square foot apartment, which is nothing, cost something like $1,800 a month. Can you imagine? And then you got to go to school, and he was lucky he had a big scholarship, but I mean, you still got to pay bills, so it's still expensive. So what I'm trying to say, for undergrad, for sure, I would recommend to go to a well-rounded school that I'm not saying against any of the conservatories, but that they can make their mark. If you go to a school where everyone's more or less very advanced to start with, I'm not sure that's the place to get the undergraduate. I think you should get it where you can shine. You'll get much more opportunity if you come to UW Whitewater.
Well, thank you there.
I mean that, because I know how committed you are to the cello. You're outstanding, things you've done, and I've been reading about you, and it's amazing. So he congratulated on that. But all these things, it's hard to put a finger on things, but you do want to be fresh and ready for your students when they come in. And you can talk shop for a few minutes, how'd the week go, blah, blah, blah. And then, okay, let's see how it's going today,
Yep.
And if you just start like that, that's good. But it's how you approach it,
Mhm.
And I notice that even more and more, even though I'm still teaching, it's how you approach everything and encourage them what they did. Sometimes they say didn't practice all week. I said, well, I'm sorry to hear that. But you know something, we're still going to accomplish something.
Yep.
Sit down, and we're going to play, and we're going to use it to practice, whatever, and I'll help you through it. So I don't want to waste time. I never want to waste time.
Yeah.
And I think they appreciate that because you didn't get mad at them, and you didn't say that's terrible and go home. No, we want to make them feel good about themselves because we don't really know what happened during their week. It could be just something went wrong in their families. So you have to be not only a teacher, a psychologist,
You do.
to a certain point, And if you have that attitude, I think it's successful. I mean, I'm not saying I was always successful. That'd be a lie, but I tried to be, and I cared about my students all the time. And that's what you got to do. You care about them almost like they're your own children.
For sure, absolutely.
And then they care about you too, and they show in many ways being kind to you, and that fulfills everything.
Really does. Yeah. That's
So I don't know if I talk too much, but you sort of get the gist of what I'm about, and I say never give up.
Yes.
I was tempted to sometimes.
Well, I'm glad you didn't.
Yeah, and sometimes my accompanist kept me going. Did you ever feel like quitting on the Rococo when you were a student? But and then of course, Mark had a lot of advantages because I'm here at home with him all the time and all. But he played it so many times he called it Cocoa Puffs, the Rococo variations.
Cocoa Puffs, that's nice.
And he played it, with St. Paul and all, and it was natural,
Natural. That's that word. So upcoming projects yet in 2023? More performances of the Dvorak Concerto or other?
Sometimes they come at the last minute, I'm going to give another, probably a cello recital here. I haven't even thought. Once I go fishing, then I start thinking.
Well, and cars too. It looks.
Yes.
You're really into your some nice cars.
Yeah, I'll show you. This is my Mustang. It looks just like that. I don't know if you can see this.
Yes.
It's exactly that car.
Excellent.
And all my other cars I put downstairs because they took over my desk. But no, I have some Corvettes. I'm lucky. I mean, 2 beautiful Corvettes and a Mustang, and
nice.
The latest ad was a BMW, but that's a used car, so it wasn't high rent, but it's a 640i or 650i. You know what that means?
I don't. Sorry.
Well, I didn't either before I got it, but it means it's fast. It's a 2-door coupe, and I drove it to pick up a bow yesterday, and it was so comfortable, and. But the Corvettes, like the new ones, they're really refined. They're fun. I think it's good to have those other things. And I'm going muskie fishing with my daughter again.
Nice. Good luck.
And, thanks. I need that. What do you do for recreation?
We read and we do plays. We do some community theater. I like golf. Golf, I think, is the brain game in golf is good for my stage game, I found, and vice versa.
It is. You know, Stefan does a lot of golf. Cartman, you know.
Yes.
And the student I had, Seisha, she golfed with him and learned a lot from going to the camps where he serves, you know. And yeah, talk about camps. Mark, he's booked solid. And the thing, I wish he would take a few weeks off, you know, because you know, being principal of an orchestra, it's just there's a lot there, a lot of pressure, and you have to get all the bowings ready for. It's the cellist and the first violinist. They get together and do the bowings for orchestra. Even the bass section, they you know pretty much follow. But he loves it, and I love to go there and hear him solo with the orchestra, and it's fun. One of my favorite things is the Brahms Second Concerto. Every cellist, right?
Yes, that's
oh, it's heavenly. And Brofman liked it, and he took Mark on concert tour with him, and he had him play those solos, and Mark loves to perform with him because he's such a fine pianist. When Brofman plays, it's heaven because it's so easy for him. It doesn't look like he's working ever. And actually, that's what Starker teaches, the same type of thing. And if you have a student that moves around too much, you know, they're taking from their technique. If you think about it, it's good to move if it's natural with the flow of the bow or something a little bit. But have you noticed them? We used to talk to Yo-Yo Ma, and he says, "Well, he said he was yo-yoing."
Nice. What's funny?
I like his humor.
Yeah, with some students, it's almost as though they can be so statuesque, so rigid to begin with. You have to get them to move, and then get them to put the body motion then into.
I get it.
You know, the bow and the left hand channel them, but at first everything is just so tight to begin with.
I used to do too much, way too much, and I don't think I do near as much. But you know, because I found that it takes from it can eventually, but what you do is very good because you work within what they have, and then you gradually evolve because they can't stop.
Yeah. And every student's different too. So, but that's part of the fun challenge, isn't it?
It is, and on organ, you know what the challenge is? They play it like the piano, and sometimes I see things they're doing like this. You know, I said that doesn't help your piano playing either. I mean, if you're flowing gracefully one direction or the other, that's fine, but they're putting all these extraneous motions in, and I says I wouldn't even allow that in class piano. I don't. You know, I want them to play and not waste motion because as soon as you do, it's a pain. It doesn't even feel good. So they learn, but it takes a long time. I'm glad what you said. I'll try that.
All right. Excellent. All right. Well, Paul, this has been a real treat, as I knew it would be, and lots of takeaways on so many aspects of not just cello playing, but music in general and life even. So thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, I thank you so much, and I'm glad I did it. At first I thought, oh, I don't know if I can get this ready. But you know, it is sort of second nature to us, isn't it? You know, by now. How many years have you taught? I don't even know anymore.
Oh gosh, let's see. I guess 32. Yeah.
You're getting there.
Yeah.
That
sounds like a big number.
But you're young yet.
Well, I like to thank you for saying so.
You don't even have any wrinkles yet. How do you do that? It's wonderful.
All right.
I just want to say, how's your family?
They're doing very well. They're doing very. You know, it's both of my sons are. Their musical outlet is primarily keyboard. They're pianists first, but they also both play cello secondarily. And I like when you're describing with Paula and Mark, it's so fun to just even watch them play duets together. And react in the moment to what the other person's doing, and just it never gets the least bit old.
They sit down and play cello duets, right?
Yes, yes.
Oh, that's wonderful. The piano, I don't know. When Mark was young, he took to it so, and he only had a few lessons from a lady. That's just very beginning. But he, all at once, his junior year of high school, he accompanies me by memory on my cello recital.
Wow.
So I happened to do the hide and D, and he had all that memorized. And the piano faculty, everything by memory. I never did understand how he'd say, wait, I said, Mark, you're going to, at Santa Rosa, he was going to play the hide and D. And I said, you haven't worked on the last movement yet. I'm concerned. Your dad would work on it 3 months in advance, because it's hard.
It's hard.
He says, Dad, it's 11 days away.
That's forever.
Yeah. I didn't understand how you think that way. But, he played it, and it was like he'd played it all his life. That's what I don't understand about his gift. He under pressure galore, it's just, and when he did the Minnesota Orchestra thing, he played the Barber Concerto. He never played it before. And every note was there, everything was there. And I was happy, he used my cello. So I get to sit, and the way it was adjusted that time, it came right to my face all the way back. And was I pleased with that?
Sure.
And that guy, I gave him 15 concertos, and mind you, Mark had won this. They'd only give him the grand prize. There's a first place, and there's a grand prize in Wamso, and they'd only given the grand prize out 3 times in 38 years.
Whoa!
And he got it. And the thing is, then they say, well, what do you want to play? And so I called up this specific guy who's really a pain. And he argued with me. And he's everything I mentioned, he'd say, Yo-Yo played that, or someone else played that. Well, he says, who hasn't played that? And Mark wanted to do something so that the orchestra would interact more. He didn't want to just do the Rococo variations. And I says, give him the Barber. Can you do that? I think so, Dad. Okay, let's give him that. So I gave him the Barber. No one had played it for 38 years with the orchestra. And so he did it, and the orchestra was unprepared.
Uh-oh.
And they had to work and I sat in all the rehearsals. Ordinarily, they would have killed the artist. They made him play it so many times because they didn't know it. But, in the end, they did a beautiful job, as you would hope.
Yeah.
And Mark he did 3 nights in a row, and that's a lot in a major orchestra when you're 19. It's a lot but I was so proud of him. It was just so beautiful. And he got all those runs. He didn't miss, honest to God, he didn't miss a note. And that sounds like impossible, but that's how, and I never could understand, except when he's a kid, he constantly explored the cello. He didn't just play what he was supposed to. And I just played what I was supposed to most of the time and ran outside to play baseball.
That's funny.
Anyways, it's great. I don't mean to take your time. And I hope you have a wonderful summer.
Thank you. You too.
And I know you're a great teacher. You have the right everything. You have the right personality, and I know you have the knowledge galore. You've written books. And if you have any samples, I'll pay you for them. I'd like to have them.
Oh, terrific. Well, let's continue our conversation.
Okay, let's do that.
Terrific. Well, thanks again, Paul. It's been a real treat. And likewise. To all of you out there, happy practicing all weekend, all this coming week, and we'll see you this time next Friday.